welcome everyone to the CAC meeting number 6 for the Sherwood West Relook project. I'll just go around the room here and we can just introduce ourselves really quick. So I'm just going to start with Brian.
Good evening. I'm sorry, Brian Dorsey.
Go. There's two Brians. That's right. Brian
I always forget that too. I always forget that. Go ahead, please, sir.
Oh, I'm Brian Dorsey. I'm chairman of the Police Advisory Board, local Sherwood resident for 15 years, and local real estate agent.
I'm Brian Fairbanks, and I am a resident, local business owner, and the president of the Sherwood Chamber of Commerce.
Jean.
Jean Simpson. I am chair of the Planning Commission and a Sherwood resident for 23 years.
Emily Campbell.
Yeah, I'm Emily Campbell. I've lived in Sherwood for 20 years. I'm a community member of this group, and I am a real estate appraiser in my all day long, every day.
See here. Rodney.
Hey, Rodney, member of Sherwood for about 3 years, and I'm on the Parks Board.
Tim.
Hi there, Tim Rosner. I'm City Council President. I've been a resident of Sherwood since 1998.
And then we have our group of consultants from Angelo Planning Group. Kira.
Hi, Kira Haggard. I'm a planner with Angelo Planning Group.
And Joe.
Hi there, everybody. Joe Dills. Good to see you. Angelo Planning Group.
John.
I was just about to get to him.
Oh yeah,
there's on the list here. I don't want to forget John. John Clifford, your turn.
Yeah. So I'm John Clifford. I'm also with the Sherwood Parks and Recreation. Been a member on the board for a number of years now, and I've lived in Sherwood since '97. So I've seen quite a bit of Sherwood grow and prosper.
Great. Well, I'm glad everyone can join us this evening. So with that, Joe, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, let's pull up the PowerPoint. Or actually, we'll start, I'm sorry, back with faces, because our first items are check-in on the process. This is an additional meeting, but our process is flexible, kind of taking the approach of making sure we do things correctly, not just do them fast. Let's pull, actually, I misspoke. Let's pull up the schedule. I was thinking we were going to go put to public comment next, but. So there we are. We've been working through the plan concepts and the scenario framework. Last meeting, we got some good direction from our discussion with the CAC. We have come back with those ideas, hopefully responsive to kind of what you were looking for. And that tees us up for your direction tonight. And if you feel you're ready, we can make some draft scenario maps and bring those back at the next meeting. So that's our process location. And I think the next item is public comment, or am I remembering that right, Erica?
The approval of the minutes.
So did anybody have any changes to the minutes? Okay, Jean?
On page 2, under the bullet points, there's a paragraph about Councillor Scott's clarification. I think if we just ended that the Sherwood West concept plan was adopted several years ago, instead of just saying it was adopted. Okay. And then I have a question on page 4. When we're referring to the residential place types in Sherwood West, it gives overall net density numbers. Are we doing assumptions based on the maximum, or is can we clarify that these are maximums? I don't recall from the conversation if our scenarios are using maximum within each zone.
So at that time, those numbers were suggested as maximums, but our conversation has sort of moved towards new tools and more
Mhm.
customized zoning. So I think bringing us to the present, it's sort of to be defined what you would prefer as a direction.
So for the minutes, just clarify that these are the current maximums within those zones.
Yep.
For illustrative purposes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Those are my only two comments on the minutes.
Okay, anybody else had a comment? Okay. And we haven't been formally voting on them, but we'll move ahead as those is corrected. And now we are up to public comment.
Great. So I sent out to the CAC 2 public comments that have been received. Tonight, I am going to be reading 3 minutes of each into the record to be consistent with what we have done in the past. So with that, the first public comment comes from Cindy Bells, and I'm going to start my clock now. If you don't build it, they won't come. Why intentionally increase the population of Sherwood? It sounds like the city is choosing to promote urban sprawl out into the countryside in an effort to avoid infill housing and density within current city limits. From the CAC 11/3/2021 meeting. It was recognized that if the community doesn't add more land for new housing, housing prices will continue to rise and the community will feel more pressure for infill development at higher densities. Infill development and high density housing doesn't always necessarily align with Sherwood's character. If you don't expand the urban growth boundary, the land won't be developed and no one will be forced to put in multifamily housing. Problem solved, Sherwood retains its character. Keep reading for information about how the online open house survey was flawed. People who live here like the small town feel and don't want all of the problems that come with larger cities. So I'm perplexed by the city's push to keep building more houses and growing Sherwood. Do Metropolitan Land Group and other developers have too much influence over city government? They obviously benefit from it, but existing residents, your constituents hate the idea of housing developments creeping up on our beautiful rural hillsides. Looking at the River Terrace development in Tigard is cringe-worthy and should serve as a cautionary tale displaying what developers do when they take over a once wooded natural area. Requiring them to plant a few tiny trees doesn't make up for the large mature trees that they destroy. In the area designated as the future Sherwood West, there are large residential plots. As you drive up Edie Road between Elwert and Eastview, you will see there are newly constructed homes on acreage, one of which isn't even yet completed. So people clearly aren't looking to sell their property as they have just moved in or are still waiting their move-in date. I also have a friend who lives near Edie and Elwert who is planning to remodel her home. She isn't looking to offload her property either. There are many others who own land in this area that have been with their families for decades. These are their forever homes and they don't want to sell. What is going to happen to all of these people living in the area slated for development? Is it the city's plan to annex these areas in and force these residents out through exorbitant increases in their property taxes? Since almost 75% of Sherwood's residents already own their homes, affordability is not a factor for them. Why get rid of Sherwood's beautiful rural areas when the majority of people who will benefit from building affordable housing are from other cities and states? Why destroy the countryside for any reason at all? Once it is gone, it's gone forever. We need trees and forested areas to help cool our rapidly heating world. Developers clear out everything and fast track global warming. And there goes the timer for that public comment. And that was from Cindy Debs, and that was sent out yesterday. And then the last Cindy Bells, excuse me. And she also submitted some photos that were sent out to the CAC committee as well. And The last public comment this evening comes from Tim Derby. And he says, hello, I know the Sherwood West development is going to happen, even if every single citizen is against it, but I would like to be on the record that I am opposed to the new development. If you care at all for the people of Sherwood, you will listen to us and do what you were elected to do. Thank you for doing the right thing, Tim Derby. And that is all the public comment we have received.
All right. Let's
Can
move
I-
on.
Can I ask a question about that or? address
absolutely.
concern About public comment? My question is, and if this has been covered, I apologize. What happens to the public comments? Like Cindy Bell's comment continued on, and like all the comments that we've heard throughout this process, they've had fair, arguments there. And so I guess my question is, number one, where do those comments go and are they available for other people to view? Because she included some graphics in there, and we've seen that in there before. So I don't know this is a real question. I don't know where this stuff gets deposited for people who on the time limit, and I understand the time limit. I totally understand that. Would like to continue to view that. And then the only other thing, and I don't want to stir up the hornet's nest, but every time I hear the comments, I have the same thought process, which is communication. I mean, I know that's what we're doing here right now, and we've been holding, events and things like that. Certainly the city of Sherwood has done that, but you read these and you feel that they genuinely don't understand what the outcomes of some of these things are. So, to use words like eminent domain or other things, and so I just I'm part of something here, and I'm also part of this community, both, and we all are. And I just want to make sure that people are getting a chance to finish reading those and that they understand what's, some of the things that are really going on here, because it doesn't seem like they do. And I mean no offense by that. I really want everybody educated on that. So thank you.
Erica, let's get your feedback on where people can access, and then we'll go to Tim's comment.
Yeah, so all of the public comments that we received go into the record, Brian, and all of the public comments have been uploaded into the recent packet that's up on the website and also the project page. So if people do want to follow up and read the public comment, they are online, or they can always call staff, and ask questions, how they can get a copy of, the public comment for that night's meeting, and we will, gladly provide that information to them.
Okay, let's go Tim and then Jean.
Thank you. So I just want to expand a little bit on what Brian Fairbanks just said, because I agree with him 100%. And I had the opportunity to meet with 5 individuals last month who reached out to me after the last meeting. We had a wonderful conversation. They're very concerned about Sherwood West and how that gets developed, and they want to see farmland preserved as well. But coming out of that meeting, it was really apparent to me that there is a lack of understanding in the community about the overall process that we go through as a community around bringing land into the urban growth boundary, and then and how land comes into the city limits, and then how that land ultimately gets developed, and who really holds the keys to those critical steps. And I think it's important, maybe we could spend some time in the next meeting just kind of talking about that process so people watching can hear that, because one of when I met with those folks, several were under the impression that once this plan's approved, that development will start immediately, which is about as far from the truth as you can get. This is just a concept plan, and there's so many more steps and things that we have to go through as a community before anything happens over there. And I think there's a lot of confusion about who has the keys to annexation, to the urban growth boundary expansion, because a lot of these things are effectively out of our control as a city and a city council. The way just on a personal note, the way I view these processes is us getting ahead of that and making sure we're planning and someone else isn't planning for us. And I really believe that when I think about these concept plans and our comprehensive plan, you know, and all those types of things. So I would recommend that maybe we spend some time in the next meeting doing a little education for the community on how the bigger picture works, how these processes work, and how the Sherwood West relook fits into that, so people have a better understanding of that.
Jean?
Everything Tim Rosner said, Councilor Rosner said, plus what has come up at the Planning Commission level is the marketing and how the city of Sherwood markets public involvement processes and projects that we're doing, making sure that the presentation to a layman reading it, and I think maybe working with staff so that, because this is the first committee, then it's going to go to public hearing before the Planning Commission and the City Council. And these same questions are going to be raised at an even more sense of urgency when the City Council starts voting on this. If there's not a clear understanding of what is happening, we're going to have even more members of the community really confused and concerned of the actions that are being taken. So I think it's important that maybe this document, when it starts going through the process, has a white paper of explanation that says your state legislators have already determined how annexation works. The city has no control over it. The state has already determined that House Bill 2001 is going to be mandated in your community. The city has no control over that. And really clearly defining what Councilor Rosner said, which is this committee doesn't have the keys that's going to make the 1,200 acres come into this community. What we have the ability to do is manage that growth so that it enhances our community and doesn't come in under the mandate of someone else's control. And however we can market that and get that knowledge out to a person looking at this project is what we need to do. And we struggle with this at the Planning Commission level, and I know the council struggles with it, that trying to get someone 100% up to speed about what the state is forcing us to do is difficult in the 2 minutes that they give us when they read a brief recap of a project. So marketing ideas would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Well said, G.
Brian?
Yeah, speaking of marketing, well, first I want to say, I mean, we've been meeting for months, and if people still don't understand the what and why about what we're doing, that's definitely a communication breakdown. And if it's our part or the city's part, but definitely something we need to address quickly. To what Jean said, I thought of a little marketing slogan: steering the future of Sherwood so that the state doesn't. And I think it clearly speaks to what we're trying to do. If people don't have an analogy of what we're doing so that they can more clearly understand it, or sort of a slogan that speaks to what we're doing, they are going to struggle because they're going to think that we're calling this shot and that, you know, we're pushing this down their throat. And that's definitely not the case. This is taking these steps in advance. It's like setting up a server account so that when things happen, we already are having a plan in place to enact, so that the state doesn't say, well, since you don't have a plan, this is what you're going to do. So I agree with everything that's been said, but that was just my 2 cents there.
That was a brilliant tagline, by the way. Love it.
Kennedy, please.
Yeah, hey, I was just going to chime in. I agree with everything that was said, but I think part of the breakdown here, it's really House Bill 2001. If you don't get that, okay, you're not going to understand any of this. So that's got to be clearly communicated. And then like what Tim did, so I sat on Sherwood West the first time around, okay, back in 2016, and I understood a lot of people didn't have a kind of a grasp of what was going on. So I would do a lot of things like what Tim did. You know, just those conversations, you catch people at Starbucks, or you catch them at symposium or whatever, you know, at a kid's sporting event, you know, on the sidelines there. And that's an opportunity to engage and educate. And I think that's incumbent for us to look for those kind of opportunities. And I would be very open to this group's ideas of, you know, whether it's town halls or whatever, but how do we connect with these people and kind of steer the conversation so they're really getting the facts and understanding why this matters to them.
Okay, thank you, Kennedy. Let a couple other hands up. So let's just keep going on this. Jean, and then back to Brian.
Quick comment to what was just said. Speaking of marketing, we want to reach out to our community members and our friends. Is it possible for staff as we go through this process to put out a Facebook post, or, I mean, as a member of the committee, I don't feel comfortable drafting a document that explains, but if the staff gave us a handout and we handed out on our Facebook or social media that says, just the tagline that Brian used when he said, we're doing this to control our own destiny instead of the state. That's beautiful. And put that out there in the social media so that people can then start the conversation and then ask you what that means. And if it's crafted by staff, then it would have, accurate information that can be legally distributed. Thank you.
Okay. All right. And then Brian.
Yeah, and I definitely don't think we can minimize the impact COVID has had on our ability to really do a lot of take a lot of these ideas and put them into action as far as having meetings and getting together with folks. I think once we start having, again, public meetings, that will really help to get people both involved, but also help them to be more informed as they're able to attend these meetings and sort of see how we're conducting ourselves and getting some real-time facts instead of watching it maybe after the fact, catching a piece of it here and there on YouTube. So I think things will get better.
Okay, good feedback. I think the team has a lot to work with, and maybe just to capture one point, we'll mark it for next time that we do have a kind of an action plan for these ideas, and you can have a discussion about that. Okay. All right. Moving on then. Next item is the informational update on Western Edge North-South Connector. So over to you, Erica.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. So this is really an informational update tonight about a Western Edge North-South collector in the Sherwood West area. So what we have heard from the CAC over a couple of meetings now is to really look at a new north-south connection in Sherwood West that would help kind of alleviate the traffic from Elward as Sherwood West grows and also the region. So Bob Galati, a city engineer, and we took a look at Sherwood West and the conditions. And what we have shown on a map is kind of our best proposed alternative right now that we're looking at. And it is this new north-south connector that runs north from Chapman, and it utilizes the existing right-of-way in Eastview and then along Edie Road, and then would connect up north through that northern roundabout and head north to Shoals Sherwood Road. There would be improved, intersection crossings, as well as a new crossing over Chicken Creek. There are other things that we need to look at with this alignment. We need to do some transportation, some further analysis, and we'll be doing that analysis and coming back to the CAC to letting you know what we have found. We're going to be looking at doing some traffic modeling, as well as looking at the cost of this new road, putting the cost together. What we're thinking right now, this would be a local, this would be a local road to Sherwood, and we're thinking that it may be a 3-lane arterial all of it would have to be built within the urban growth boundary because it abuts that that western edge where the western side is in the rural reserves. And since that side is in the rural reserves, we can't improve it, you know, with transportation facilities on that side. So, you know, one of the things that I want to, you know, talk to the CAC, to all of you about, is that, you know, if this road were to go in and the other side is still rural reserve, you wouldn't see a lot of improvements, you know, on that western side. There would be a curb and a gutter, but it would remain, you know, pretty rural looking. So it would be like Elwart now, or what we see along Brookman. And that might pose some safety concerns to the community. That's one thing. Let's see. So right now, this is what we've proposed, and we'll be coming back to you over the next, you know, meeting or two to, you know, give you updates about, you know, what we have found in regards to the cost of this road, the traffic modeling, and some other issues. Are there any questions, or does
Yeah, let's start with Tim. Tim has his hand up.
Well, first of all, Erica, thank you to you and your staff for starting to dig into this. It's the first step in, if I'm being very honest, probably, you know, many years of effort, you know, to get a new alignment for Elwart put in. Lots of work with the county, potentially even the state, you know, when we think about how it interfaces with 99 West on the southern end there. But I do appreciate all the work, but I just wanted to add for the committee, you know, part of the reason we need to think about this at this time is because if we're going to get outside funding for a project like this from the county, like MISTIP dollars or even state dollars, you have to have a plan, and you have to start the process of looking at what this looks like. No one's going to give you any money if you just have an idea. So this is a really important step, but there's going to be a lot of work between this step and what this committee produces and what I'm hopeful for is a new alignment to leave traffic, you know, going through our neighborhoods in the future. But I just wanted to put it in kind of that larger timeframe context. Did I get anything wrong there, Erica? I know it's being really general, but it's just the first step that we're really doing here.
No, Tim, you are exactly right. This is just a first step, is having it in the concept plan. You know, the next step is, you know, of course, we can't plan for transportation improvements until this area is actually brought into the UGB, and then we can do our, you know, our big, broad transportation amendments to our transportation system plan for the city as a whole. So
right.
It's one
get it into the transportation TSP, and then get it into the regional transportation plan. There's a ton of steps here. So yeah. But thank you again for working on this. I appreciate it.
So my question is, Brookman is going to probably be similar, and I guess would be the closest I would say is how we look at Brookman, where the north side of it is being developed and the south side is outside of the boundary, and we're creating, it seems like we're creating a challenge in the Brookman area because it was designed that way. The expansion area from Metro used the road as a boundary, and we have an opportunity here where the boundary is there. Why would we not move our connector road in a quarter mile so that we don't create a self-fulfilling prophecy of a boundary problem? You know, I don't know, the road that ends at the P in Chapman, is that an existing road or a proposed road? Because it seems like a quarter mile in, we're that much further away from the creek corridor and terrain, and we are able to develop both sides of the road and use that last quarter mile connection further to the west to allow development to occur on both sides of the road. And so comment, why there instead of in?
The gray lines in the map are proposed roads for the most part. Some of them follow existing right of way.
So using Chapman, the road that come up on P, I don't know how far that distance is, but taking that as the north-south connector, and instead of it swinging right to Hague, maybe it does swing right, but where that arrow points off, maybe that becomes the connector road to a Chicken Creek Bridge and then connects up to Eastview, instead of making 100% of this road a boundary road, make the last 90% of it a boundary road, so we don't create a safety hazard for the entire length.
Do either Tim or Brian have some feedback to Jean's question? Is that why the hands are up?
Sorry, I forgot to take my hand down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Erica,
I think she said it. I gave her a thumbs up because I was thinking the exact same thing. I don't think I have anything more to add to that, so I should have taken my hand down.
I do have one more thing to add to that, Joe. When we looked at this line, Jean, this was actually a really good fit with the existing parcels that abut the boundary. There's only, I would have to go back, but I believe there's only like 3 parcels that this line actually cuts through. So this road would actually only cut through 3 parcels. Otherwise, it's just right along the boundary lines of all the parcels going to the north from Chapman.
So would the city be willing to purchase more than the regular right of way so that we don't create a safety hazard by creating fully developed on one side and partially developed on the other? It's
one thing that's one of the things we're considering. Yes.
Tim, back to you.
Yeah, I just kind of piggyback on what Jean said, and I can't answer that question. I'm only one vote, and we're so early in the process, but I would tend to err on the side of designing it for the goals, which are safety and trying to route traffic around our neighborhoods. Because we also have the issue, or not issue, but we're going to be looking at that alignment of Brookman in the Brookman area too, on the other side of 99, and ideally all of that interface as well. And I think I tend to agree with you, Jean, that southern portion there, making that work a little bit better in terms of how it connects to 99, especially if we're still looking at doing like tourism zoning or something like that, then you really don't care as much as if you have neighborhoods. Driving right through neighborhoods, because it's going to be a different type of development down there. So I think all of that comes into play as we look at it.
One consideration here is if sort of one of the premises and reasons to have this road is to relieve Elward, but also not have traffic go through neighborhoods. The moving it east puts it through future neighborhoods. So that's the trade-off. In the world of scenario planning, we could draw up a couple of options for you to look at, and so you can kind of see it more specifically. But that's the notion that sort of jumps out at me, that the trade-off for moving it east is some neighborhood impact for future neighborhoods. Let's go Rodney, and then Jean, you might have, if you have another comment.
Yeah.
I'm not up on the Brookman issues of the safety side of things, but just driving around to other cities and other communities and where I've lived in the past, I think we need to build a road that doesn't feed the communities, but just gets people through. So the least amount of intersections, the least amount of everything. It's really ugly down in Medford, but they raised up and went over top of the city or whatever, right? But I see the ring road, or the road to get around Sherwood, is about getting non-Sherwood residents past us and leaving Sherwood to be beautiful in its own little community. If we keep trying to route everybody through the community, it's going to go busy and bad fast. So that's my comment. So the further west you can go, the further you can make it less intersections and just get people through, I think would be better.
Gene, another comment from you?
Yeah, and I agree. If we are going to focus this on being a bypass road, which is what it looks like,
Mhm.
I think we go into it with the understanding that we can't build it halfway. And that's what I was hearing at the beginning of Erica's presentation, that we would focus on only half of it because the west side would not be able to be developed due to right of way, and how we can only ask a property owner to develop their half of the right of way. And if we leave the other half undeveloped, we're creating safety issues and we're not creating a bypass. So if we're going to use that as a bypass alternative to keep people out of the neighborhood, then I agree that making the commitment from the community standpoint to make it a full width safety road is the way to go to keep it out of the neighborhood. So
Sounds like a cross section also would be helpful to you, kind of being able to
Yes.
visual that when we're back next. Okay.
well, and it's a lot, and whether or not the council can justify paying for two sides of the road.
Tim?
Can I speak to that real quick? What I'm hoping we set up here as we move down the road is justifying paying for both sides of the road through county dollars or mistip dollars or other dollars, because to Rodney's point, we're solving a county problem, right? We have commuters in Yamhill County that are trying to get to the work centers in Hillsborough, and we're solving for that. So the county and or mistip dollars or whatever dollars we can get should be coming from those sources, and we should be addressing the safety issues and developing both sides and make that a regional connector. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Okay. So in our, I don't see any other hands up. So my summary here would be just for terms of the staff teams, the city staff team study of this, leaving it as drawn, but coming back with cross-section or whatever further definition of how it's not half a road. And then staff also may have some thoughts on the funding side as well.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. Looks like that's it on that item. Thank you. Let's keep rolling. So the next couple of agenda items are under the umbrella of defining scenarios for Sherwood West, which is where we are in the process right now. And it's basically 3 or 4 topics that picked up on your discussion and interests from the last meeting. And we've brought back information that hopefully cumulatively kind of set us up for a discussion of what should we put in these scenarios later in the meeting. So let's start with the first one, which has to do with middle housing. And Erica, go ahead and take us away on this one.
Great, thanks, Joe. So through our comprehensive planning process that we undertook, for the past 2.5 years, we did a lot of community surveys, and we also did community surveys with our residential design standard work that we just completed. And through the comp plan and through the residential design project, these middle housing types kind of popped up as being the most important in the Sherwood community, and those happen to be ADUs, small single family detached homes on smaller lots, townhomes, cottage clusters, and duplexes. But I really want to caveat this conversation too about these housing types from what we have heard from the CAC in previous meetings. And that would be when you have these housing types, we have to make sure that we have the community amenities, near them, or built surrounding them. And that includes, green spaces, places for, people to walk from, A to Z, places, that the community can, meet and greet each other, out in our neighborhoods. So that's what we've heard from the CAC, is to really have these amenities, with these middle housing types.
And the point of bringing this back was if in our set of new tools, if we can tailor the concept plan concepts to zoom in on what people liked, let's do that. So we just thought we would capture that and catalog that for you. Jean?
This goes back to marketing and getting the information out. If people are getting sound bites from this YouTube video or when they watch, just clarity that these are community supported middle housing types as required by state mandated House Bill 2001, because the community supports single family detached, but we are required under that state mandate to put housing types in, and we've done a lot of outreach like Erica mentioned, and the rest of the conversation is exactly spot on. But I really think in the addressing of this, making sure people understand throughout that community supported of a state mandated direction.
Great, thank you. Okay, not seeing any other hands. The next set of slides is directly related to this. I'll do the setup here a little bit for you, Erica. The conversation last meeting led to a discussion of affordability as it's represented in the Sherwood West concept plan. And to summarize 20 minutes of conversation, there was interest in exploring affordability within the set of housing choices, but in the context of Sherwood. And so as defined locally. And Angie was good enough to volunteer to help us look at some comparables and provide some information. And so the next set of slides are kind of under that umbrella of seeing examples of affordability that hopefully are on target for kind of Sherwood way of doing it. So back to you, Erica. Let's go to the next slide.
Great.
Oh, this is also more about middle housing. I'm sorry, we weren't quite done yet. So.
No, this is a really quick slide, and we, have, talked about this message, at many other meetings. As Sherwood grows over the next, 20 plus years, our housing needs analysis, really states that we need all types of housing in Sherwood, but there's going to be an increasing need for medium to higher density housing during that time period. Jean, did you have your hand raised?
No, but I have concern that comment is not representative of how I heard it. It was more that Sherwood has an increasing need for varying types of housing for people to be able to age in place and to move in at entry level. And that stating that we need higher density is not what the community vision and statements were. I think if we bring
I think we're gonna get to that in the next slides here for sure.
Yeah, I think if we present this slide at another public hearing, I think it would be phrased differently.
Yep. Next slide. So this is work that came out of our comp plan, and it's a couple of years old, but it's still relevant. We are still seeing sale prices of homes in Sherwood. They're continuing to grow. with the sales price, of the region. Rental costs, are a bit higher in Sherwood than the regional average. And then we also, see about, 1/3 of Sherwood's households are cost burdened, where they're spending about, 30% of their, income on rent and mortgage. And we had a conversation about this, at our planning commission meeting when we were going through our housing needs analysis. And, one of the conversations that we talked about, had to do with people live in Sherwood because of our amenities. They choose to live here and they choose to pay that higher cost because of the amenities that we do have. And I just want to, express that viewpoint as well. Next slide. So the next couple slides came from Angie and her work and providing some examples of affordable options from around the region. And actually this housing type right here actually is Hunter's Ridge in Sherwood. It's a mixed use condo project. And we can see here that it's been popular with grandparents because it's accessible. There's an elevator. There's minimal, there's actually like no yard, so people don't have to do yard work. And Angie just really expressed that, this is, an affordable option for residents to age in place. So here we can see there's, 1 bedroom, 1 bath, and most recently it went for $270,000 listed price. Next slide. So here's the townhome. This is in Villebois. It was recently listed at $380,000. And when we talk about townhomes, we talk about, how they can be a starter home for, new families, in communities. And most recently, this was listed at $380,000. Next slide. So a lot of these are going to be condos and townhomes. This is also a condo project here in Sherwood. This condo project, the units range, in various sizes. This one's a 2-bedroom. Oh, I can't read it here. Is it 2 bath or 1 bath? 2 bath. Thank you. Almost, it's 1,126 square feet. And most recently it was listed for $312,000. Again, this is just another townhome like in the region. It's in Hillsborough. And again, townhomes and condos, when we talk about, new families, we talk about, grandparents, aging in place and downsizing. These provide, more options for people. Next slide. And this is a small lot detached home. This is actually in Sherwood. It's 3-bedroom, 2.5 baths, and it was recently listed at $470,000. And this is, I forget the name of the development, but it's right behind Target in that area. Again, another condo in the area, 2-bedroom, 2-bath. This is in Hillsborough. Minimal landscaping. $215,000 was the recent listed price. Next.
Is this the last one? Or?
I think this is the last one.
What's next here, Carrie? Yeah, let's go back.
And I want to say Angie is going to hop on the line here, hopefully around 7. So if you have any questions about what was shown, we can go back to any of these slides.
Let's try a little discussion here. Let's go back, not to that one. Let's go to that one. Such a nice little house to look at. But I want to do a little round robin check-in with the committee if I could. Not thinking about the details of these buildings and so on, but these fundamental choices about the right price point. Some of these, you know, there's attached townhomes, there were some condos, there's this small lot. Does this look like an appropriate way to sort of visualize affordable choices for Sherwood West? And I'll just go down the list and maybe we'll touch base with everybody. Brian, you happen to be at the top of the list, so we'll go to you and then Tim after that.
Brian Dorsey.
Brian Dorsey, yes.
Yeah, and I appreciate Angie putting this together. I'm also in real estate, much like my peer who's also on here who does appraisals. I love the footprint. I love the makeup of these particular units. But I will say the challenge we face as we look at these existing homes is that things have changed. So we're looking at a snapshot in time, and the land acquisition costs, the development costs, material labor was very different when this unit was built compared to now. So we're not really looking at apples to apples. Some developments are being put up in opportunity zones where there's a lot of incentive for people who are taking money out of stocks that they've sold to these opportunity zones and build houses. So they're getting some benefit and tax relief there. Sherwood doesn't have, so it's going to cost more to put this type of home up in Sherwood West than it did when this one was built in the early 2000s. So that's something we have to keep in mind as we talk about affordable. Affordable is relative to the zeitgeist of the moment. So we're in a very different space. Things may be different in 2028 when we start to see these go up, but and we're going to be seeing more of them than just one on a lot. That will impact things as well. Hopefully keep prices lower, but then also increase the amount we're spending on development costs as we widen streets for parking and, you know, all that goes with having more units of land. So, but I like your question.
All right, thank you, Brian. All right, Tim, reasonable set of choices. What are your thoughts?
I apologize. I had to step away for a second, so I caught most of that. But did I miss cottage clusters in there? I thought that was one of the types, affordable types that we had talked about in previous meetings.
It is. We just don't happen to have a comparable of it. They're a little hard to find, but you're right. We just don't have it in this slide deck.
Yeah, because I think that's an important option, especially for people that want to age in place, because they don't necessarily want to deal with multi-level units and stairs and even elevators. So I think that's important that we have that prominent. Brian, your comments about, you know, reselling homes and the cost for those versus new homes is spot on. I do worry about that a lot. I was just doing some quick math while we're going through some of these, but like the one that's still on the screen here, that's $270 plus a square foot, and that number seemed to be pretty consistent through all those options, which is, I don't know about everybody else, but that seems like a lot of money to build a home or even to buy a home nowadays. But I do like the formats. I think we need to work on them. I think for the purpose of answering the question about, does this align with the character that we like in Sherwood and how we want that looking moving forward, it'd be helpful to have some wider shots. Like this home right here looks great in the context of that picture, but when you look at it in the context of, you know, is it, you know, 15 feet from the nearest house or 5 feet from the nearest house, you know, kind of what does that overall picture for that neighborhood look like? It'd be helpful to have some of those pictures. Now this one, I happen to know where that is, so I know what that looks like, but I think as we look at some of those out of city options, it'd be helpful to have those wider contextual pictures as well.
Okay. Check my list here. It's moving around. Emily, let's go to you.
Sure. This particular home that's on the screen right now, I know is already now pushing 500,000. I just appraised one in that project last week. So they're increasing quickly, as we know. But I like all the options that Angie sent over. I think that she's right on with what I think Sherwood is looking for. The one thing that struck me, Erica, when you were talking about that one particular condo, was the lack of the landscaping, low amount of landscaping and everything. And I think we see over and over again that people respond to the nice front aesthetic look of things in Sherwood. And I think you can, as we move forward, those development requirements as far as how things look from the street, I think that's where the average citizen is more likely to approve of what's happening, as opposed to specifically what's being built. I know that's contrary to what we're trying to do here, but and there's a great project in McMinnville in regards to cottage clusters that it's not actually a cottage cluster, but it is little cottages. They've done a fantastic job. It actually has multifamily and single family detached homes in it. It's a really great place. It's called Sherwood Village. I'll take photos next time I'm there, just to share. But I think we're on the right track for the middle housing there.
Could you say the name of that example?
It's called, I'm not sure that I'm pronouncing it correctly. It's called Sherwood. It's spelled CHEGWYN.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
John, we haven't heard from you. What are your thoughts on kind of these as examples of the middle and attached housing types?
Yeah, so I also agree with this small little neighborhood across from Target. It has a lot of character. The houses, even though they are different in style, they all have the same character, which is kind of the arts and crafts look. Nice paint job. So it looks like they did a nice development here. One thing that we'd also need to think about is not just the home, but parking and how the streets are going to be laid out in homes like this. And as you're aware, most of the parking in this particular development happens in the back. So you have these little alleys. So I think we need to think about, people's access to the home. Do they want to enter through the front door, through the garage, or through a side door? So those are things we need to think about, especially with elderly. What kind of access do they need into the home? Is it going to be, they're going to have to, take a few steps up from the garage into their, kitchen or laundry room, or, do they prefer to, maybe walk, like for instance, this house here, someone can easily just walk from the front door across the street to Target and do some shopping and take the walk back home and enjoy the day. So there's some things that I'm thinking we need to think about as well. What kind of pedestrian access as well as vehicle access to some of these smaller density housing.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, Kennedy?
Yeah, hey, just real quick, I would say I appreciate all the effort put into these middle tier options. I like them. And I think, you see the ones, you don't see the clusters cottages around Sherwood, but I think the others items you do, and I think they fit our character of our city.
And some of the more condo ones, is that also included in your statement that you like what you've seen here?
Yeah, I would. And again, I think, I think I'd echo what a lot of us feel is, the preferred option. I mean, we want to create more affordable housing, but I think what has built Sherwood and why people do like coming to Sherwood is the high percentage of single family residences. Yeah. And I think we want to keep as much of that character as we possibly can within the limits of House Bill 2001.
Great. Okay. Brian Fairbanks?
Yeah, I could hit on a couple points that Emily and Kennedy hit on. Emily's, I completely agree, and it was my thought as well too. People are willing to accept certain things, but visually out in that front, they want something a little bit more than that. And I think in Sherwood, that's a key component of that. And I don't mean to drag on any other place, but I think it was Cindy Bells's examples that she used in her comment earlier to kind of highlight that. And that's my one, you know, besides the traffic situation is my second biggest concern over in the future development of this in this city. And then to Kennedy's point, or just part of that discussion, I agree on the housing. I really appreciate Sherwood for its desire to have that single family dwelling, but understanding that there are constraints that are either here or coming. And so I'm certainly always going to lean towards some of those the cottage clusters, certainly the detached, and you know, ADUs, man, that's not an account, but those are where I think Sherwood would really like and appreciate strongly the most. So landscaping.
Okay. All right. Thanks everybody for hanging with the round robin. It's actually very helpful. Rodney, over to you.
I gotta admit, this isn't my sort of area of expertise at all. So I think I agree with most of the people that it is curb appeal and things like that to make the city stay to have its feel, even though it's in the background. So that's me. I do like the target area where around commercial areas you have those nice little clusters of buildings and things like that. To throw a joke out there, we are Sherwood, so we should probably go take a couple looks at England and see how they do their row houses, and we can put one of those in here.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Jean.
So I made a few notes. The first I would say is I like hearing the committee's comments that the front yard appeal is really important because the Planning Commission and the City Council just completed a lot of really hard work on residential design standards. And I think the committee, because I think we're spending time that is already been spent on residential design standards, it's been voted through to council. And these options that have been presented to us are really nice. And I think they're already in play in what the residential design standards are requiring in the city of Sherwood. So if the committee needs a little update on something that was just voted by council, residential design standards now have landscaping minimums, and they have requirements of design elements on the houses as they face the street. And so I think the product that will be developed in Sherwood under these design standards will be in conformance with what the community has been used to and what they have been demanding through all these community surveys. And I think I guess my concern is that as a committee, we're getting hung up on the word affordable housing versus housing choices, because Sherwood's amenities mean that we have a couple things that we've heard about in the housing needs analysis many times, is that people say, well, rent in Sherwood's higher, but per square foot, the amount that we pay per square foot is the same. It's just that our apartments are larger in size. And that's what came out of our housing needs analysis. And so housing sizes being larger means that our housing costs more than a comparable lot that has a smaller house on it. It's just logic. And the comments that we're house burdened by third of our community, that is comparable with the rest of the community. So it's misleading in thinking that we are doing something egregious compared to the rest of Washington County or the state. We are in line with even the nation on what a house burden percentage of population is. And I think those two elements are, I guess, affordable to me is hard to say and have a definition, because affordable to us someone moving here from San Francisco, our houses are really affordable. You know, it's in the study or in the homework they gave us on page 3, it said Sherwood policies and community values. I don't know what Sherwood policies are for affordability, but I think we need to, you know, think that we just need to define what is important to us. And what I keep hearing over and over again is front porch appeal, front driveway appeal. And that my last comment is affordable. Sometimes you can't have it be in a brand new area. And so we keep trying to build brand new houses and make them affordable, when sometimes we need to look at our existing stock of houses and see if we can repurpose them for affordability. And that was just a recent study that I had heard, that people keep trying to make affordable housing brand new, when that is counterintuitive, because you've got building costs that make new housing difficult to be affordable. So that was a lot of information, sorry.
Okay, no, thank you for the comments. And let me take you back to your first comment about the design standards being so important, and of course, a package adopted and so on. Connecting that to this kind of set of pictures of condos, townhouses, and so on. The scale of these is okay, as long as those design standards are in place and are working. Am I hearing that from you?
Correct. So that's what, and I think your word scale is exactly what we were attempting to do, that regardless of what size the house is, the design elements are required. You have to have a certain percentage of windows and architectural features that
right,
everybody keeps talking about, and the landscaping has to be presented, and you have to have setbacks that are landscape. So
got it.
I think you're going to get those elements in whatever product we determine. So I think rather than worrying about, I think we just need to worry about what choices we have and where we put those choices.
Right. Okay, thank you. Now I'm up to, who did I miss? I think we may have gotten everybody. Okay, great. Thank you for that feedback. Let's go on to the next one. So I'm going to try and be brief because we want to get to the latter part of our agenda. But if you could go to the next slide. In the course of the conversation last time, somebody directly said, boy, we'd like to learn from Villebois and Frog Pond. And I think the context of the Villebois was sort of a positive impression of that community. So here's some information for you. The two examples of Villebois and Frog Pond are pretty instructive, because Villebois is a developer-led master plan community. It just in the same sense that Woodhaven was. A different history. It actually, some of you may remember, it was the site of the old Damish Hospital, a state disposition of the property, the sale of the land from the state of Oregon to what ultimately was Costa Pacific Communities, involved the city of Wilsonville very closely. But at the end of the day, it became a development project. Large, 482 acres, was not only master planned, but also coded with a tailored custom zoning district that has governed everything you see on the ground today. And it's been developed in phases that were very intentional, portions of the development to develop in pieces. The density numbers, a lot of housing units, 2,645. If you take the net acreage, then that boils down to 13.4 average units per acre on average, excuse me. That is similar to what you're seeing up in North Bethany. It's a little bit similar to what you're seeing in South Cooper Mountain. River Terrace has been referenced by some folks. It's actually a little bit less dense than that. But sort of one of the takeaways here is with the right attention to design detail and good master planning, it's, you might say it's not really how much density you make, it's how you make the density. And I think that connects to the design focus that the city has had as well. They didn't have much to do with the House Bill 2001 compliance because they were already above the 10 units per acre and they were an adopted master plan, and they had middle housing already throughout the community. If somebody, the rules have been updated, if somebody were to, in 20 or 30 years, take down one of the single family homes that have been built, then, you know, under the code, any of the middle housing types could be built. But to a person, as this process was being developed in Wilsonville, they've said, boy, that's not very likely. So that's a very short story of Villebois. If we go to the next slide, I wanted to show. Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, Joe, if you could jump back to that slide.
Yeah.
Because when that was mastered plan, that was long before HB 2001.
Right.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't even think HB 2001 goes into effect till, when does it go into effect for Wilsonville? It's not in effect yet. They're just planning.
They adopted their package of amendments in November. So they did it earlier than the state deadline next year.
Right, but yeah, the state deadlines are next year. But I only bring up that point is because it would be interesting to know, in hindsight's 2020, and you know, none of us have a crystal ball, but if the developers were operating under HB 2001, would have it turned out the same, right? Would have they done the same things? Because, you know, just as a reminder to everyone, HB 2001 gives a builder a lot of power to determine what type of housing is built on a lot. And, you know, so I appreciate your comments about HB 2001 and them coming into compliance with it. But I think, I personally believe it would be a very different looking project if this had been started with HB 2001 in effect.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we can check in with the developer and bring back some feedback on that. I will note one other thing about the level of density, and I don't want to overdo that, but the 13 units to the acre was, I believe, sort of an outgrowth of, they were, of course, looking to get a return on their investment. So they were setting things accordingly, and they were needing to pay for infrastructure. And if you look across the concept plans that have been done across the region, there's a pretty consistent minimum of about 10 units per acre on average to begin to pay for the infrastructure. Everyone is unique, so that may not be the case in Sherwood West, but just as a comparable. Let's go to Frog Pond. So Frog Pond has some differences. A couple comments on the master plan. The main one being the green spaces that flow through this development are very artfully done. And you're never more than about a half a block away from something green. Well, maybe 1 or 2 blocks, but still it's pervasive and it shows. They did a detailed tree inventory before the first spade of earth was turned. And it's a very interesting little study. They identified what they called the important trees. And you see many of those as keepers today throughout this newly built development. The other thing that jumps off of this plan is that the list of colors over on the right is something like 13 different housing types. And you can see that they have designed those all the way down to individual block faces. Now that's something that only comes out of detailed master planning. Let me move on to Frog Pond and kind of give you a comparison about that.
Before you do
here.
that, sorry.
Yeah.
On the Villebois, the other question would be, if we were to create a master plan to that level of detail in Sherwood West, would it be allowed, and would our zoning designations within our perceived master plan supersede the House Bill 2001 requirements?
The answer to the latter one is no. You have to comply. even in a detailed master plan approach. And the first part of the question again, Jean, was what?
Well, I guess that it doesn't, well, whether or not a master plan is allowed, but if a master plan is allowed and then the developer still can come in and take single family zoning and make it multifamily, you plan for failure. If we can't do our own planning and have that planning mean anything, the state rules set our master plan up for failure. So the question is moot. Whether or not we can have a master plan doesn't matter because the state supersedes it based on the answer to the second question. Is that true? Is there any way within the state's set of criteria that the community has control over their own master plan zoning?
I think my answer would be to a limited degree, that if the state's consistent rule is if single family detached is allowed within a zone, you have to allow the full slate of middle housing choices. The master planning approach allows you to create two things. One is some customized zoning. So you might have some zones that actually don't have single family in them, with broad areas that do. One, and then secondly, to try and get at design that makes it a good place when it's built. But there isn't any way around. There isn't a tool that allows you to get around the first aspect that I mentioned.
Okay, and so we, again, for marketing purposes, need to ensure that as the community reads the documents, understand that under state mandate.
Yeah. This is just a scale comparison, just to show you how big the place is compared to somewhere we know.
Can I just add on to that?
Yeah.
Because someone brought up parking, when we were talking about some of the housing types in the alleys. And just as a note for everyone, I was in a briefing from DLCD at state level, and they're proposing new rules that basically take the ability for the city to even mandate parking away. And when we ask them, well, how do we make sure we have enough parking? And they said, well, the developers can figure that out. And that's a quote from the meeting. So, there's a big push to take a lot of control away from cities on a lot of these types of issues. And I just want people to be aware of it, and that's why it's so important that we find every little nook and cranny and crowbar we can as we move through this.
Emily?
Yeah, this may be a question better taken offline, maybe with someone else, but it sounds to me like the only way to avoid that, multifamily development on every single lot is to invite the appropriate kind of developers who are going to come in and develop it the way that we would like it, the way we have planned it. And so how does that happen? How does the city court people to do that? Is that a thing that they do, or is there outreach in that for that type of thing?
City staff feedback on how the city does that, or do you want to kind of provide offline?
I think we can talk about that offline.
Sounds good. Thanks, Erica.
We'll circle back to you, Emily, and share that with others as well. Okay. So let's move on to Frog Pond. So this is an example of a city-led concept plan and master plan, and about the same size in total, 500 acres. And it's broken into 3 neighborhoods. They're called West, East, and South. And so the little picture off to the right is one of the neighborhoods, Frog Pond West. It's under development right now. The key difference from Villebois is that it isn't one big ownership. In the beginning state, it was 27 different ownerships. And developers have done some consolidation of properties, but it's the way it is sort of playing out. It looks like it will develop through a collection of about between 10 and 15 different development reviews. And so the city recognized this going into it and sort of posed the question, how can we construct this plan so that those individually knit together into the kind of walkable community that they wanted, and sort of get the best of Villebois, but recognize that it's going to be done piece by piece in Frog Pond. Much lower density than about half the density of Villebois at 6.7, although under the middle housing compliance, that now has been increased to about 8 units per acre. The other two neighborhoods, and I'll show you a graphic of those in a moment, that the plan has always been to gradually increase in the housing choices in the other neighborhoods. So Frog Pond West, mostly a detached place. East and South will have more attached choices, and they're just beginning that process right now. The specific 2001 compliance in this one, since it was an adopted master plan, was to allow duplexes on all lots. And then the city chose to allow triplexes on corner lots. And they had a very design-based discussion that led to that decision. They were comfortable with the scale and design standards that were in place. So some similarities, but the key difference is putting it together piece by piece when you know you have multiple different owners. And so that's something that you'd want to be aware of in trying to take a master planning approach in Sherwood West. Let's go to the next graphic if we could. So here's the plan. It's much more simple plan than Villebois. It's pretty flat there in Frog Pond, and the old historic Grange is there up near the word Stafford. That will be a community center over time. It's where there's a theater group that operates there now. We drew a very simple street plan, and the colors represent different housing types that are anticipated for what are called the sub-districts of the plan. But if you read the packet materials, the list of things that were looked at in this public process were pretty extensive. So not only was it land use and housing, it was some specific street design. It was a street tree plan. It was a very cool idea to make sure that you could, as you look down the east-west streets, you could see Beckman Creek at the end of the streets. And I could go on, but the point being that there was a lot of detailed thought and thoughtful process that went into that. So that's the two examples. Any other questions about master planning? Okay. Jean, one from you.
So I guess these master plans are in existence, so they were allowed under the House Bill 2001 to remain in place as long as their densities were at 8 units per acre. Is Sherwood West under the same 8 units per acre? And since we're not allowed master planning, are we allowed some of the elements that like Frog Pond has, like specific street and stream corridor design? Because I believe we have building design guidelines, but you sparked my interest in having street and space design guidelines that ensure an outcome that is desirable to the community. And I don't know if we have that tool in our codified toolbox yet.
Right. So answer to the first question of could you stay like under 8 units per acre? No, because it's a quirk in HB 2001 that you had to have been adopted by January of 2021. And so Sherwood West, of course, will be adopted years out for your comprehensive plan work. The answer to the second question is yes. With some hard work and some good public process and and your great staff and a team, you can design those streets and lay out the green spaces and do all of the kinds of things that create a really livable environment within the public realm and of streets, et cetera, and then marry that up with the private design standards of the buildings. Okay. Emily, did you have another one, or is your hand up from before? Okay. Jean, another comment?
Yeah, so when we do these design elements for green spaces, does that detract from our net density? So if we say this is going to be 100 acres of green space, then we're just pushing more density into other parts of that, or they remove that from our density requirement and the remaining land would still meet the 8 units per acre.
You have either option. You can steer it however you like.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Let's keep moving. Kira, I am mindful of the time, just to check in with everybody. We actually had an extended time for this meeting up to 8 o'clock. So we'll do our best to manage our time to finish by then. I think we probably ought to stay with highlights here, Kira, for the next set of slides.
Okay, my main highlight for this slide would be, I do think it's important as we and the community members who are listening tonight start to envision what this area could look like in the long term. And the main point that I want to hit here is this area is over 1,200 acres, and that's about 2.5 Villebois, just for context. And once you account for existing developments, natural resource areas, and future right-of-way, we're left with about 591 of what we call buildable acres, and those are the acres that would be developed in the future. And that's less than half of this area. So that's just a point that I want to hit as we start to think about what this place will look like in the future. And this list will look familiar to you, but we just made a couple updates based on your feedback from the last meeting. The underlined text here is what's changed. And kind of the biggest change is that we're considering the location of a middle school and a kind of a combined elementary and middle school site as we think about siting schools in this area. And that's reflected in our updated acreages here in the list of constants. So that's a very quick highlight, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
You get the award for the quickest highlights. Tim, go ahead, please.
Thanks for that. I appreciate it. Kira, could you jump back to the slide where you had the acreage by category? If I remember right, one of the conversations we had was having a signature park in that area. So the 20 acres seems pretty low for that, especially it wouldn't be the only park that we would probably put over there. So that number probably needs to be adjusted up. I would probably shoot for like 60 acres total. But if I'm remembering that wrong, the rest of the committee feel free to chime in, but I thought that number should be larger. It did look like the future school sites got updated because I think Jim Rose had mentioned 50 acres and probably split between 2 schools, but I just want.
I'll note that we have neighborhood parks broken out in a separate line item here. That's 18 acres. And also this doesn't include the Chicken Creek Greenway. Since that's a protected natural resource area, those acres actually fall into the difference between 1,291 and 591. So that's a green open space.
Okay. How many acres is Snyder Park? Just out of curiosity. Does anybody know?
Not off the top of my head.
I think it's roughly 20 acres, Tim.
Okay.
We'll have to go back.
I have it as 22.
22, yeah.
As well as also Snyder Park is 22.2 and Stella Olson is exactly 22.
Does that give a good comparable, Tim, do you think, for size or?
Well, and so I think of it in these terms. I mean, 591 buildable acres at 15 I'm just throwing out metro and state numbers here, but when you start to look at the numbers, it's probably a 40% increase in housing units for the entire city. So we should have a comparable. I don't want the ratio of parks per housing unit going down as a result of this. So that I think that's where when, and I'm just doing rough math in my head, feel free to correct me, but that's where I'm feeling like those numbers are a little bit low.
Okay.
I think we accounted for 9 2-acre neighborhood parks in this line item here, which was about 1 per neighborhood bubble that we showed on that previous map, in addition to the greenway. And the community park acres is what's identified in your parks plan that was recently adopted, which isn't to say we can't increase it, but that's where that's coming from.
I think our acreage per household is much higher in existing Sherwood. So that I think that's about, that's kind of where I'm coming from. So
Yeah.
Sure.
Just a suggestion then, I think, again, in the realm of drawing scenarios and alternatives, we could look at some choices for that community park and also do the math of park ratio. So we could sort of have an asterisk on this 20 acres. It's the low end, subject to the math, but we'll take a look at some larger choices as well. Does that sound responsive?
that's awesome. But that's, I'm the only one bringing this up. So I'd love to hear if the other members of the committee are amenable to that as well.
Others? Let's just stay on that kind of very narrow. I'm seeing 1 thumbs up.
Driving, so I don't have my screen on and I can't do a thumbs up, but I the more park space we have, the better is my vote.
Okay. I'm not hearing any dissent. So again, choices are good. We'll come back with some choices. So let's go on whatever topic you want to comment on. Brian, then Rodney. Brian Dorsey.
You're muted.
Thank you very much, Gee. Sorry about that. Yeah, I agree. I think the only thing that we really can't control is the green space where we're putting parks and where we're putting schools here. Everything else is going to be kind of an unknown, since those that have the lots were able to create and build them out up to those 4 units. So I would say the more we can allocate land for parks, for schools, the better, because then we will know what we have. The community doesn't want the houses built to a great degree in the first place. So the more green space we have, I think the better. So that 305 can drop another 100 acres as far as I'm concerned, and that can go towards parks, schools, bike lanes, whatever the case may be.
Okay. Let's see, Emily. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped past Rodney.
Oh, go ahead.
Are you good? Okay. Emily, over to you.
In those options that would be potential options, I would love to see one that showed, like we're talking about, this larger scale park, perhaps using some of the land that the 2 acres per park per neighborhood node may seem aggressive to me. I don't know that every single neighborhood has to have a little place to be. So I would just love to see one with less of those and then a grander scale place where people would walk to and all be together in one location.
Got it. Thank you. Okay. All right. Let's just go forward another slide or two. Make sure anybody who wanted to weigh in on these. Okay, so we'll take those constants and variables with your commentary just now as sort of a set of guidelines to use. Tim.
I super apologize. I know we're time constrained here, but could you walk through the math? Because I know we had a lot of land in our earlier conversations set aside for industrial. I hate to use that term, but offices, campuses, whatever. Employment. Is that already taken out of that 1291? Are we accounting for that? Because if it's just the 200 acres, that number seems low too, because I mean, just in that northern parcel where we have that flat land of the power lines. I mean, all of those 4 or 5 properties up there are 200 acres just by themselves.
Right, yeah, sorry. So 198, 198 is the total unconstrained acreage that is within those purple employment blobs that we looked at on the map before. So if you count for future right-of-way within those areas, there's some existing creek corridors that fall within those purple areas, and a couple existing homes. It takes out that. So 198 is like the net subtraction.
Perfect. Sorry about that. Thank you.
No, that's fine.
Okay. No, it's good clarification because all the numbers down below are net numbers.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So let's keep rolling forward. Good discussion.
Sorry, before you leave that raised a concern to me. The way she said that last comment about 198 employment acres is the net from the commercial activity or commercial industrial employment at the northern section. Does this reserve off any land for what we're visioning as a tourism commercial area in the southern area? Is that in that 198 acres also?
Yeah, it includes all 4 of the areas that we previously looked on the map.
Okay. And when we get ready to adopt this, when we look at this, can we have, not this second, but when we get closer, we're going to want to see, I think, from a commission and a council standpoint, what the jobs to resident ratio is, so that to see if we're on track with a comprehensive plan, because that's going to be key, because we have new comprehensive plan and it has goals for resident to employment numbers.
Sure.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Tim, another comment?
I apologize. I forgot to take my hand down.
Oh, no worries. Okay. All right. We'll move ahead. Okay. So new tools. You all remember the conversation. Existing comprehensive plan designations really don't create the right palette for some innovative planning, was the sentiment in Southwest, in Sherwood West. And so what new tools could the team come back with? So I'm going to walk through these as ideas to consider. Let's go to the first one. So we do need to color the map somehow. We need to consider kind of how we place land uses. And so here is a slate of customized zoning categories. And I'm going to put that in quotes. We're not doing zoning right now, but just for the ease of the language, I'm going to call these zones that we would include. And by the way, this list of types over on the left covers the span of things that we saw in the pictures earlier. So there would be one that's called multifamily. It would be the intentional locations for apartments and condominiums. Of course, size and density to be defined, but we would have a multifamily designation that would be used on the scenarios. And we can do different ways of representing it in different densities, whatever you'd like to see and test through the scenario process. If we look at your existing comprehensive plan, that's about 24 units per acre. That is on the low side as compared to modern apartment projects that are being built in today's market. So just as a sort of a touch point. We can create a middle housing zone that zeroes in on the choices that are on the support in the context of state mandate category. So the list that we saw in the pictures up in the beginning part of the meeting, we could look at focusing those to specific areas of Sherwood West where they look be appropriate for buffering from other uses, from location relative to services, et cetera. There's no requirement to include detached housing in any particular zone. So if you were to not include detached in that particular designation, then you can have it be a middle housing specific kind of designation. So that's a choice. The townhouses and types of housing that we have seen pictures of would probably line out somewhere in the 16 to 20 dwelling units per acre kind of range for that. Small lot homes, there was interest in that, like the nice gray one with the craftsman front. We saw if you were to create a zone that did that and had a maximum lot size associated with it. So the strategy would be it's specifically for small lot homes, detached homes. Then under the rules, you would have to allow duplexes and townhomes, but you would not have to allow triplexes and quadplexes. The dimensional qualities of an approach like that are such that the lots are pretty darn small to begin with. So it's not likely that a duplex or townhomes is going to be put on them, even though it's theoretically possible. So that's another possible customized new tool for you. Let's go to the next slide. And here's sort of an idea in progress to create what we call green neighborhoods. And the short version of this would be the strategy would be to ensure that there is generous open space everywhere that green neighborhoods is zoned on the plan. And you can set the number anywhere you want, but just for communication purposes, we've selected 30% open space that would be done either within each project or maybe each sub master plan area. Again, we're at the conceptual level here, but the core idea being that there is open space that is pervasive and a known quantity that helps make the housing livable. Would be the areas that would be intended for detached homes. So again, back to the state mandate, you do have to allow the full array of middle housing types. How this might be applied in some locations of the plan. Near Chicken Creek, we've got resources. The plan could envision clustering of the development away from the creek. So you create a nice kind of increased buffer area adjacent to the Chicken Creek Greenway. In the flatter areas of the plan, down from the hill, we could take the open space could take the form of the trail network, community gardens. Tree preservation is a little bit of a constant in Sherwood under your existing rules, but we could think of a slate of things that would be more commonly shared type spaces. And then finally, in the hilltop areas, there could be additional flexibility to allow the open space to even be part of lots, if you're looking for a strategy to have large lots. So I want to put a footnote on this idea is that whereas there are strategies to be able to ensure there's open space, the compliance with the middle housing rules, it's such a complex set of things that we need to do some checking with others, with DLCD, with Metro, just so that we have an informed approach to preparing the scenarios. And then, the last one shown on this slide is there would be a mixed use neighborhood commercial. There was a favorable comment last time about the possibility of some folks living upstairs from a store. So this is a set of ideas, could be combined with master planning, could be combined with incentives. And I think we're basically going to learn as we go. If you have interest in seeing these on plans and kind of further develop, it's not going to be a one and done deal. We're going to have to iterate these ideas a little bit. So let's take some comments from individuals, and then it might be useful to do another round robin.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry I didn't raise my hand, but my question is, are there any considerations about height restrictions and maybe percentages of how tall a certain group of structures can be, whether it's a single story or 3 stories or possibly 3.5, depending on, where you put the garage and how you walk up to the first floor. I was just wondering, I haven't heard anything about that yet. Is there anything regarding what we can do or what is mandated as far as any restrictions on how high a particular building can be, whether it's a single family or a multiplex?
Yeah, as a general principle, setting maximum height standards is completely up to the city. There might be a nuance or two within the middle housing rules that I'm not familiar with, but the slate of design standards and development standards that are embedded in your code today, all of those can be applied to these types of new tool zoning. Okay, so I'm seeing Doug, Jean, and Tim. Doug, let's start with you. Comments or questions you have?
Yeah, so going back a slide, so I assume we're talking all 5 of these would be in play in any one configuration, right? So can we go back one slide?
You go back one, Kira.
So I like this conceptually. So, really, I think this is this is the type of innovative and creative work I was really looking for. So appreciate that. I like the green space stuff. That's the way it builds in the 30%. I don't know what 30% means. I have to kind of get a feel for that, but I like conceptually that is great, to make sure we don't end up with just these tracts of houses. I like the small lot stuff because I think that kind of if someone wants to build a big house on the small lot, they can. If someone wants to build a duplex on it, they could. It seems unlikely someone would build a townhome there. Hence the use of those other things, which I like. And then as far as the middle housing goes, my only question was, would we be talking about further dividing that into subzones, so where we could actually pinpoint, like, this is duplexes, this is, if we wanted to, and I'm not sure we do, but because I wouldn't want to see, like, if we had these middle housing zones and then everything was townhome or everything was duplexes and we ended up with nothing that was cottage cluster or vice versa. So that was my only question or comment there. Is that
I can't think of something that precludes that. I think you could, I'm thinking back to the Vaubois map, where they had 13 different housing types. You could break this middle category into individual pieces. You could create a cottage cluster zone where that was the specific intent.
Yeah, and I'm not sure we'd want to create a duplex zone or a townhome zone, but I could see where we might have this type of zone and then, a subzone of it, or maybe a separate zone of it that specifically targets cottage. If cottage clusters are something we think we'd like to see some of, then we can at least kind of target that very specifically.
One other idea comes to mind that might be a tool for you is that you can also essentially plan and code for variety. So you could say within this zone right here, you need to provide 20 to 30% of this type and 20 to 30% of that type, et cetera.
That's another way to go about it. Yeah, I like that. You could say in this middle housing zone, you'd have to have at least 20% cottage cluster or something like that. Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you. That was my question.
Okay. Jean?
So I guess my concern is with the middle housing, if you're focusing on draft density of assumptions of 16 to 20 dwelling units per acre, and we're thinking that there's going to be a mix of duplex, triplex, quads, but we can't master plan it to tell the developer that these are what's going to be there, and then they turn into townhomes, we're going to be at 24 dwelling units per acre anyway, correct? I mean, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this tool that you're saying. If we say that this zone is middle housing and we are not going to allow detached housing here, how does that work so that we maintain duplexes and cottage clusters and don't, I guess
Yeah.
I'm just.
I think the way that we just talked about it, Gene, so it's
But
so
he said
either we
can't
could
do
target
that.
it very specifically with subzones, or we could do the percentage coverage kind of thing that we just talked
Right.
about.
But Joe, can you confirm that we can do that? Because I thought in your first comment that we can't not master plan and we can't designate what is built.
Umbrella comment is we're forging the tool here to do it be in order to use it. So we're creating the tool. Specific answer is you can define the variety and define the housing types you want in this middle housing zone, one. And then through master planning, you can design them, you can site plan them for how they will actually apply on the ground. Now, keep in mind that a public master planning process is not using survey level data for topo and other spatial dimensions. So a public master plan, Frog Pond's a good example, has a little bit of a plus minus to it, to how exact the layout on the ground is. But that's probably going down too much detail. The point is, if you wanted to have a certain density range or housing range within this middle housing category, I believe you could do that. And I'm gonna keep coming back to my footnote. We have to do some checking with others, but
Yeah, because I think to me, it seems like in our regular zoning, we're going to get middle housing. So we are double providing an opportunity for developers to double dip in an area that we were hoping to provide what our community wants, which is single family detached or something similar. And so if we allow that and then we have a middle housing zone, we can protect the middle housing zone and ensure that middle housing is built there, but we can't protect the single family detached and ensure that single family detached is there. So my fear is that we will not end up with the planned result that we want when we can't protect the two zones as intended in a plan.
Mm-hmm.
I'm scared of adding more density that then can be doubled up on by developers.
Tim?
Just carrying on that conversation, it gets back to Gene, I think a comment you brought up in the other meeting about how we even think about these assumptions of dwelling units per acre, because in areas where we're going to allow single family detached, we have to assume, since a developer can control that the numbers are going to be higher. So in terms of overall averages and meeting the goals, how do we think about that as opposed to thinking about it within these specific areas? Maybe the units per acre is a broader brush analysis, but in the detail, we're getting back to what Doug brought up, because I wanted to mention the same thing, is maybe we need more specific, zoning or types in there. I know we're not zoning right now, but I do think we owe it to people in Sherwood West to let them know what we're thinking about in terms of what the zoning would be looking like out there. So I think we need to get creative in terms of how we do that math, right? The math is not just within a particular area, it's across multiple types of zoning parts in terms of dwelling units per acre. And then, and just to amplify what Doug said about the middle housing piece, cottage clusters are a great example in my mind. If we don't do something specific there, there's not a lot of economic incentive for a developer to build a cottage cluster. They can make a lot more money building townhomes or triplexes. So we have, one way you incentivize that is only allowing cottage clusters. So there's an argument there I'm not saying that's the only middle housing we would have, but that we would have, areas that are set aside for cottage clusters.
Right. Okay. I'm going to keep going here, and we'll then continue with the round robin. So next two are Rodney and Brian.
Just one quick comment is that I did like Villebois, that it was kind of detailed so that you have mixed zoning in each area instead of just this is all middle, this is all single detached, and that kind of divides the city up. The other part is that we talked a little bit about having the zoning based on if you want to zone this, how many units you have to provide this much parkland, or you have to be within this distance of a park. So is that in here anywhere where it sort of says that if you want to start doing something, you have to provide park space?
Yes, in the sense that we have already looked at a concept of how neighborhood parks would be in every neighborhood in residential setting around the plan. So at a framework level, I'll call it, we've already sort of identified that each neighborhood park, the residents around it, they're all within about a quarter mile or 5 or 10 minute walk from those parks.
But I think the comment was that if we said single detached homes and someone came in and said, okay, no, I'm going to put in cottage clusters instead, for every unit that they put on, they've gone from 1 unit to 4 units, they would have to provide that additional park space because the parks were planned based on 1 unit per acre, whatever the acre per acre is. But if you're going to increase that number, you have to proportionally increase the park.
Yep.
On your dime.
Got it. Okay. Brian Dorsey.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm saying, I would love to see, as far as zones go, multifamily sort of speaks for itself. And we already know and like the idea that we have right now with Hunter's Ridge and Sherwood, how that looks. I think it would bring a sense of that community village to Sherwood West that we like about Villebois, if we had an area that was zoned more specifically for that. And then the rest, looking at small lot homes where it really is limiting what they can put on it as far as triplexes and quadplexes. It would also keep the homes more affordable as well, because they will be smaller homes. And when I say affordable, I'm saying, comparatively affordable. A comment I'll make about ability too is that, I didn't move to Sherwood because it was affordable. I moved here because it was a safe city and with great schools for my children, and a place where I felt my family would be able to be safe and have a high quality of living. And I'm worth paying whatever the cost is for that. So it's not about affordability for the people I think that live here in Sherwood. It's about quality of life, and we're willing to pay more for it. So even if we built a home that was $200,000, it could go for $400 because people are willing to pay more to live on that piece of land in this community. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Okay. Brian, let me come back with a question on that. Back to the information that Erica shared, that there's this percentage of residents that are cost burdened. Is there a role for Sherwood West serving some of that issue?
And that's the challenge. And being in real estate, we see that it's not always what you want the house to sell to the price that you want to purchase the house for. It's what it sells for. And I think for individuals, and it's hard to get your mind around the fact that a house can start off at one price and end up costing 50, or selling, I should say, for $50,000 to $100,000 more. Yeah. It's the demand is there because of the community that house is in, where it's located. Location. And Sherwood as a city is a prime location. And so, if it was a house in Portland, sometimes there's people that wouldn't pay as much because the location with all that comes with it with regards to crime, quality of life, schools isn't as attractive. And there's a price that I wouldn't pay to live there. So I don't care how affordable it is, I wouldn't want to live there. So I'm willing to pay more. The people of Sherwood are willing to pay more. And I know that's a challenge for those that want to get in at a more affordable price, but it's just that it's location. And
Gotcha. Okay,
you know,
thank
that's what
you.
we're paying.
Great. Angie, good to see you.
Hi, sorry I was late. I had a work event tonight that I cut short to kind of split the difference between the two.
Yeah.
I hear what is being said in regards to single family and developers and what the city wants and all of that. I just want to come in and speak up again for the city also talked.
And we lost your audio. Let's see. Just give a sec to see if you reconnect.
And manufactured homes, buy a cottage cluster, whatever it may be. And I, for one, find too many clients that want to be in Sherwood and can't, whether it's the younger generation who hasn't built up the ability to purchase where we're at right now, whether it's the grandparents who are switching from a higher income to a retirement income that's not the same, but they want to be here by their grandkids. So affordability, or paying what it's worth to be in Sherwood is great for what Sherwood is today. Single family homes are great. We do have a lot of people who want single family homes who are speaking up, but we have a lot of people who maybe aren't speaking up publicly who want to be able to afford to live in Sherwood. And the only way they can do that is by buying a condo or buying a townhouse. And they will buy those when they're available. We just don't have as many that are available. And if we don't build those at a more affordable price point, we're making Sherwood a very exclusive community by not opening up.
Looks like we lost you again. I don't know if you can hear me, Angie, but your audio has gone on and off a little bit. I'm going to
Today. However, developers are not going to build something that people aren't going to buy. So when we say that Sherwood wants this, but we want to steer developers to building, one thing or another, developers are doing their homework. They're not going to build, cottage clusters if they don't think they can sell them, if they don't think there's a demand for them. So there is a demand for all types of housing in Sherwood, and it's a kind of, if you build it, they will come sort of thing. We don't have it yet, enough of it yet. And so it's hard to really see the demand for it when we don't have it. But I'm telling you from what I hear from people who grew up here in Sherwood with me, who would have liked to stay here and couldn't afford to, from grandparents who try to move here to be with their grandkids and can't, and they have to go to Newburgh or somewhere else, even farther away. The demand is there, and builders are not going to build something that they don't feel like they can sell.
okay. And then one more question back to you, Angie, if I could. The packet materials, and I don't know if you can see the slides now, have a piece about customizing the zoning that we think about in Sherwood West. Did you have a chance to look at that? And does it look like a reasonable set of tools to do for our next step?
I'm sorry, all I heard was for our next step because my screen froze. Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Did you read the custom zoning piece? And do you have, do you support the team using it for the next step?
Unfortunately, our household has been in flux the last couple weeks, and I have not had a chance to read that. Okay. I apologize. I can look into it and provide any comments after the meeting.
All right, thank you. Let's get a couple of others that haven't weighed in on the customized zoning piece. Some folks have had to leave. Let's see, John?
There I am. Yeah, so I did have a chance to look over the documents, and Yeah, I think it's a good start. You know, it definitely identifies, you know, what each individual zone is comprised of. And I think what some of the things that we need to think about is how these. I know that we have restrictions on what it called, where you have a house next to us, setbacks and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So how is that, you know, there are things that you know we haven't discussed, but does affect how we incorporate certain building structures, whether it's the actual home or the garage or anything else that is a structure within that property, and how that incorporates, you know, whether it's a single family home that eventually turns into a multifamily home. How do we make sure that everything's done appropriately?
Yeah, good comment. And sort of the working assumption on all this is that the design standards that you've just updated would apply
Mhm.
within these new tools.
Yeah.
Can I answer
Okay.
that since we just did that as a planning commission?
Yeah.
So John, to your question, and that is, it's like you're just hitting me a softball because that's perfectly what we did residential design standards, is to ensure that regardless of the scale of the building that's developed, whether it is a single family detached or one of the middle housing or even the quads, that we are creating the same design elements and the same design requirements and the same setback requirements, regardless of what the unit looks like.
Mhm.
So in theory, from the street, you would see the same design elements, the same setbacks, the same landscaping. It would have the same look and feel as existing houses in Sherwood, where you have, irregardless if it was a duplex, triplex, or quad, it would hopefully have the scalability aspect to it. And your comment about height is probably the last piece to the puzzle to ensure that we put appropriately sized heights next to other zoning. So if we have small houses, we want to make sure that the zoning that's next to it doesn't have cottage clusters next to 3.5-story townhomes. So I think that's a piece we need to incorporate into this planning when we do it. And hopefully Eric is making note of that so that when we do that, we make sure that we buffer zone height when we do that. So, but yeah, I don't know, Erica, how hard would it be to get residential design standard link out to the committee so they can see what we were trying to accomplish or what we did accomplish in this?
Oh, I can definitely send the committee the link to the new adopted standards tomorrow.
I think it's good. It's good background, but also I think it's good understanding to know that is way more level of detail than we should ever get into in this extra in what our mission is here.
Right.
It's good background information to understand that this is being handled through existing processes within the city and within the code.
Now, kind of also sneaking in to say that these design standards will be coming before us again in June when we incorporate the House Bill 2001. So anybody that is as involved as our Sherwood West group, if they see fatal flaws in our design standards as we approve the House Bill 2001 requirements, we have another set of eyes to look at it. So a selfish ploy to get another group of people who is active in our community looking at what we're doing.
Gene, we've heard from everybody, but I want to make sure, did you have your hand up for yet another comment?
Yes, you asked about the zoning, custom zoning. And whether or not we agree with it. When we get these scenario-based things, I'd like to see what piece of the puzzle, what percentage we're doing multifamily, what percentage we're doing small lot, which ones we're designating, how much percent designating middle housing versus, I mean, I really love the piece, I think it was Brian that said, putting cottage clusters as a specific zone within middle housing, you know, a
Mhm.
zone within it. And if we build at that density, what would the net result be within the Sherwood West area at the end of the scenario? So when we do the scenario and we put all these custom zoning in here, what does the net dwelling units per acre come up with overall?
Mhm. Okay.
Because these numbers here, straight up scare me. I think you guys are being way too aggressive. I think you guys are putting a lot more density in here than anybody in the city of Sherwood would be comfortable with as a starting point, knowing that it can be more dense.
But how can you say that? Because we don't know what percentage of the land are going to be designated to each of these types.
Right, but I'm just, you're right. I'm just fearful.
Yeah. It sounds like, if I could kind of summarize a little bit, it sounds like it would be helpful as a next step to help us better understand and better refine these zones, these new tools. If we did some graphic work to see how it looks on the ground, keep it conceptual, but do some of the capacity calculations that you mentioned a minute ago, Gene, and our challenge is to keep this at the concept planning level. But still, I'm sort of hearing from you some ideas to work with, and the team would help further define these tools by doing some graphic work as well.
Yeah, if we said we have 300 acres to work with and we do X percentage for each of these 5 custom zones, this is the net result.
Right. Okay. Okay, that's
Yeah.
very helpful guidance.
And then we don't even have to put it on paper. We're just drawing out a graph. That way we're not looking at any one particular lot. We're saying, you know, we have this number of acres, assign this much density, irregardless of where we end up plopping that. Then we know we can work with the numbers to say if we want to end up with 10 units per acre, well, we have to do this much per custom zone.
Okay. All right. And I hope we have the latitude to do
Formula
just
then where you can
a
just
little bit of
play with
graphic kind of work to supplement the math.
I think that, yeah, if I could just comment too on that, I think that's fine. But I think what I'm also hearing is we just need another round of refinement on this before we get to presenting like the final set of 3 scenarios. And if you need some graphics to help with that, I think that's great. But I would add, you know, because we keep saying we're just doing a concept plan, and just to take this conversation up to about 100,000 feet, just for a second here, you know, the Senate bill that changed the annexation rules and took the city's ability to control annexation away. House Bill 2001, which took the city's ability to manage single family detached zoning and housing types away. What it's really doing to us is pushing us to think farther out and get in front of stuff. So I am completely comfortable with taking our concept planning to a little bit more detailed level. I think we owe it to the community. We need to be thinking about these things farther in advance. And we owe it to the landowners out there too. So they have some more specifics in terms of what we're thinking as they think about their land values out there and what they're doing. So I think, I know we keep saying we're just doing a concept plan, but given the overall context of the environment and the change that we're operating in, going to a much more detailed look. I'm not saying we go and look at setbacks and stuff like that, but you know, looking at very more specific about what type of housing types in each zone are going to be allowed, stuff like that, I think is perfectly acceptable. Just my 2 cents.
Okay. All right. We are in the last 10 minutes here. Let's see if we can kind of finish. This is good guidance for next steps. Let's go past the custom zoning slides, if we could. The master plan approach, we talked about this with the examples of Bilbao and Frog Pond. Let me just provide a little additional kind of perspective. That the things to be mindful of when master planning is that you want it to be, I'm going to look at the last 3 bullets of this list. There are challenges if some property owners are ready for it and favorable and others are not. And that's manageable because you can do a master plan in phases and work with the properties that are ready to go first. But we've worked in a couple of projects where property owners just weren't anywhere close to wanting to develop their property. And so it was not a meaningful exercise for them. Just an issue to be aware of. It does reduce the flexibility for developers in future development reviews, but the trade-off is, of course, for more certainty. And then we have the details of clear and objective zoning that have to be implemented as well. So that's just a couple of other observations on master plan approach. I'm going to skip past incentives here. Not much to say there. But if we go to the next slide, I don't think we're quite at the point yet where we're defining themes for the scenarios. Rather, we are refining the tools, just like we said a moment ago. But we'll look at the tools from the perspective of kind of using each of these sliders, so to speak, the housing mix, the neighborhood variety, the open space amounts, and sort of embed that in the refinement of the tools as we come back. So let me stop there and see if we have any kind of further questions or guidance, ideas. Okay. Then Brian?
Yes, Jean spoke, I think it was Jean that spoke to the number of residents versus the number of potential jobs created in that employment sector. Is that something we can get more detail about for our next meeting, since that will possibly influence what we're looking at in terms of those zones?
Yes. Yeah, pretty easy math. Did you do jobs to housing ratio? Is that the metric, Gene, that you use? Okay. Okay. Yes, there'll be estimates, but we can give you, there'll be index numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, then I think we are through our agenda. And we've moved multiple steps forward. So helpful. Any last comments from any committee members? Erica, how about you?
None.
Let's think about the calendar. We need some time to work on things, and the beginning part of January gets a slow start kind of anyway. So I think we're looking to early February as a reconvening date for the committee. Wednesday, February 2nd, sort of jumps off the calendar to me.
I'm not available, but I'm just one person.
I'm not available, and again, I'm one of 2 people.
We could, the other choice, because I know a little bit about the team calendar, the other choice would be to go not to the 9th, but the following week, the 16th of February.
If we have to do it on my birthday, I guess we can.
Happy birthday.
When's your birthday, Tim?
February 16th.
Yeah, we're close together. I didn't know that. But you're older than me. You'll always be older.
Okay.
I'm younger at heart, though.
All right, then I think we've done it. Thank you, everybody, for a long meeting. Appreciate the conversation, and happy holidays to everybody.
So again, we're tentative on this February 16th.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
All right. Bye.
Thanks. Happy New Year.
Thanks.
Merry Christmas.